Afternoon or good morning, wherever you are across the country. Thank you for being here today for our session on building and sustaining a culture of belonging. I am Jennifer Marania. I am a diversity and leadership consultant. I have been doing diversity work now for over 20 years, and probably in the last 6 or so years, specifically focused in aging services. So I'm excited to share this presentation with you today and also get to know you through the process. As Sarah said, it's going to be interactive. And so, yes, I'll be sharing information with you. And I'm going to ask for your engagement because I know that in your organizations, you're doing this work. And there's so many things that we can learn from one another as we are all on our journeys. And I want to make sure we have time to do some of that sharing as well. So I'm a diversity consultant for Leading Age Maryland, for several other aging services organizations, mostly on the East Coast. And once again, as I'm sharing some of this information with you, I'm going to share some examples from current, particularly they are CCRCs doing the work. So I'm going to include some of those examples. And once again, want to make sure we have time for some dialogue around your own examples and things that you're doing in your communities. As I am going through this presentation, I'll do my best to pay attention to folks raising their hands. Feel free to stop me if you have any questions. We'll have more time for Q&A at the end, but as we're going through the presentation, if there are questions, feel free to ask so that we can kind of focus in on what that question might be related to what I'm sharing. So, let's see, our objectives today, we're going to spend some time identifying options for developing organizational diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging efforts. We're going to talk about sustainability. How do you stay engaged on the journey? And we're going to talk about how other organizations are also approaching this work. I love this quote because I think it speaks so much to the nature of a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work. And the fact is, it takes all of us. And this African proverb states, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And with the different communities and organizations I work with, some of the frustration that folks share is they want to move faster. They want to see change immediately. And the fact is, this work is a journey. And it's also, depending on the cultures of our organizations, we're talking about a culture shift where we're centering belonging. And maybe we just had not been as intentional about the work before. And now the focus is how do we bring more intentionality to it? So we do that together. And it takes time, and we build this over time. It's not a one and done thing where we do one event or it's part of our goals for a year and then we check the box and we're done. This work is ongoing. So our shared intentions as we have this next hour together, I'm going to ask you to treat what you hear in confidence. And I say that because there may be stories that communities might share, organizations might share, that we just want to be respectful of what folks are sharing in this space. Treat others with the respect you expect of yourself. So once again, as we share with one another, being respectful in our conversation, and then recognizing that all participants' views and ideas have a value, right? So even if we disagree with how somebody's doing something or what have you, that recognize that there's value in all that we have to share. And we don't have to agree with everything, but can we respect one another in our communication? I use these shared intentions not only here as I present, but also in your organizations, in your communities, as you're creating your own dialogues, right? As there are opportunities for sharing among folks in your organizations, I find that beginning conversations, especially difficult conversations with shared intentions, is really helpful in moving the conversation forward. Because sometimes we can get stuck with things that people say that might not be respectful or might be misunderstood, and then we end up getting stuck there instead of moving forward with really deepening our conversation. So just to begin with our shared intentions and recognizing this in our conversation today. So I wanted to start with an activity, and this is where we begin talking to each other. I'm going to have Sarah do breakout rooms in just a moment, and just a couple minutes. We'll do about just 5 minutes in those breakout rooms. Actually, I'll give you 6 minutes because we have groups of 4 that will be doing what is going well for you this week, and what do you hope to get out of today's session. So these 2 questions in your breakout group, spending a moment with each other, just getting to, I'm sure you might know each other, but who knows? Maybe there's someone from a different state who you don't know so well. So in your breakout groups, you'll be sharing what is going well for you this week and what do you hope to get out of today's session. So Sarah, if you can set up those breakout groups, that would be great. And 3 or 4 folks is fine, Sarah.
Okay, great. Do you have a preference for how many minutes?
We'll do 6 minutes in the breakout rooms. And then when you return, if you can choose someone from your breakout room to share out on some of the themes of, what's going well and what do you hope to get out of today's session. I want to make sure that we speak to the things that brought you here today. All right. See you soon.
Right, everyone should be heading to their breakout rooms.
Bless you.
Jennifer, I kept you out of a room in case you want to move throughout.
No, thank you so much. And then also, if you could make it like 6 minutes and then give them that extra minute to close up.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did.
Perfect. Thank you. Oops. And then Sarah, there are a couple folks here. Were they placed in breakout rooms or did they just join? Hi, everyone.
They probably have not clicked the join a breakout room, or they left, they have it open, but they are doing something else.
Okay, got it.
Chris and Jeff, let me know if you're having trouble joining a breakout group.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yep, it gives them an additional minute.
I'm going to stop my share so we can see folks who are off, who are on screen. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. We'll wait for everyone to finish up in their breakout rooms. All right, welcome back, everyone. I believe this is all the folks back. So would love a few share outs around what's going well and what you hope to get out of our session. Can I get just a couple volunteers? Go ahead, you can take yourself off mute. Oh, David, thank you. Go for it.
So Karen and Belinda and I were together as a group. We lost Belinda. Unfortunately, she dropped off. I don't know if she came back to the main room. I think what we want to get out of today's meeting is how to continue to build community in a rapidly changing world where we're losing residents, long-term residents. And with that, we are losing community. We're losing community as residents age in place and they're coming downstairs less frequently. They're not participating as much. We're still feeling the effects of the pandemic and the isolation that we were required to instill until we figure things out. And we're wanting, we're doing everything we can across the board, I believe, in terms of integrating new residents. But as Karen mentioned, many of the new residents are still working. And so we're not seeing them. And then the Russian immigrants, they have the Russian daycare and there's adult daycare. Our Asian residents have their own Asian network where they have their own shopping buses. So as much as we're trying to bring people together, there are these micro communities that exist out among the residents and outside of the building. So it really means that we have to continue to be alert and keep trying new approaches. And what's unfortunate is that during the pandemic and since the pandemic, on the compliance side, the leasing office has so much more work to do that it's more difficult to manage by walking around as we used to. Pardon me. It's more difficult for managers to break loose, or especially me in my role, to take time out to just spend an hour in a birthday party and be a participant.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, those are the challenges we're facing. I mean, the positive, we're here, we're alive, and we're doing our best.
Yes.
And we're wanting to do better. We're wanting to see what ideas are out there, what's working for others that we can apply.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you.
Very helpful. Can anyone else, can I get maybe one or two more folks with what came up for you, what's going well, and what are you hoping to get and learn from?
Sure, Jennifer, I will.
Thank you, Mark. Go ahead.
We had Donna from Lutheran Social Services, and we had Julia from Live Well. I think there are a couple, basically the great stuff this week are wonderful happenings with residents, and they're doing well. That's always a wonderful thing. I talked a little bit about board governance and getting ready for a board meeting. Kind of boring, but still cool. Yeah. I think in general, words like insights and sensitivity and new ideas was kind of thrown around as captures from day. I think David really identified a lot. And, I would say for us, where we're located, we have 9 sites, and I think there's a lot of long and wonderful heritage, as I'm sure many members here have, and that's great if the traditions are good, right? And I think sometimes communities stay homogenous, and then when there's a change, it's not that they're not healthy, but I'm not sure that it's as embracing, or at least looking at all the opportunities really amongst not only our residents, but their family members and the teammates that are there and things like that. So I think, you know, we're just looking at what is every edge we can do to create some new opportunities to, I don't think every community is for every single person, but for those who do choose it and identify with it, what do we do to make the most of that kind of quality of life? We talk about abundant life, and obviously that abundant life is very dependent upon each individual, but how are we shaping that kind of from all those different angles? So, you know, I think maybe that's a lofty expectation, but I think it's a beginning part of the conversation. So.
Right. And I appreciate you saying it's the beginning part of the conversation, Mark, because absolutely, we're opening up this conversation. I'm going to share some tools and resources and ideas that I have to share with you, and we'll share with one another. But this is the beginning, right? This is on, I'm hoping that, you know, in your breakout rooms and with your colleagues, that you remain in touch and keep these conversations going and continue to use each other as resources, because what we might find is that another community might be doing something that you're like, we didn't think about that. How's that going? And you just learn from each other. It's not about competition. It's about sharing and collaboration. And I want to really encourage that in today's conversation and today's work.
If I could add one more thing, Donna, who was a part of our group, she had mentioned one of the great things being they had student volunteers this week. And I think that's a category that we hadn't talked about, was not only are we trying to get these ideas and insights for teammates, residents, family members and such, but many of our organizations serve as institutes of learning. And sometimes the first experience with seniors, but certainly a lasting experience. And so I think, you know, again, it's also how are we learning to help others learn about these kind of cultural shifts and being open, and at the same time creating freedom for people to make mistakes in it. Donna, did I capture? I know you had said a couple of things.
No, that you got it. Thank you, Mark.
Yep, that's all, Jennifer.
Perfect, perfect. I want to move us because this time is going to fly by, and I want to get to the presentation. But let me just take one more note. Is there anything that David or Mark missed that your group said, hey, can you also speak to this? Is there any kind of anything else y'all want to add that you're like, this is something that's really on our group's minds that came up? And I'm going to pause for just a moment in case there is. And perfect. All right. So I'm going to move forward with presenting, and then as questions come up, once again, I really want us to engage with one another. So feel free to ask during the session as well. So I wanted to share these definitions with you just as a base of this conversation, making sure that we're speaking the same language, because yes, I'm talking about belonging, but for me, especially doing this work now with different industries and across the board for over 2 decades, that diversity is not limited to race and ethnicity. We speak very broadly about what we're talking about: different backgrounds, experiences, disability, sexual orientation, socioeconomics, religion. Equity, it's fairness in the sense that we're not treating everybody exactly the same. And to the point brought up earlier about there being some micro communities. Yeah, guess what? That's partially because, yeah, thank you, David, that people want different things. And that's a good thing, right? That's okay. Are we honoring that? Are we fostering that, right? So I think that really speaks to providing equity for folks in your communities, that folks have different access to the different things that they want and need. And then inclusion. Are we really creating this culture where people's unique values, perspectives, backgrounds, experiences are valued and respected? Does that exist in the ways in which our residents communicate with one another and our staff too? Yes, we are here to serve the residents, and we also have to make sure that the staff that is serving these residents, that we're doing the work alongside, that they feel valued as well. We need them, and I'll go into, and you're going to know this data already, but I want to remind us of the important work that we are all doing in this space. So one more thing around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I've been using the term belonging a lot more in my work over the last several months because I have found it to be more accessible. And I say that because what's happening across the nation, diversity programs sometimes have really been pushed aside. folks have had more of a negative reaction sometimes when you hear that word versus positive. But ultimately, what we're talking about is this sense of belonging. Do folks in our communities, do folks in our organizations, the people who work there and the people that live there, do they feel like they belong? Is their full potential engaged? Are we respecting their diversity? Are we treating them equitably? Are we making sure that we are creating an inclusive community, right? Because when we do all of those things, we create a sense of belonging for everybody. Even if we don't see them all the time, even if we might not interact with them all the time, it doesn't mean that they don't feel like they belong. Because when we are incorporating these other aspects, then that sense of belonging is central. All right, so the feeling of, I love this definition, the feeling of security and support when there's a sense of acceptance, inclusion, and identity, right? So can you say that your staff feel this? Can you say that your residents feel this, right? The sense of belonging. This just quick video. When it comes to belonging, once again, not everybody might want the same thing. So what might that look like? So just want to share this quick video with you. So you have a teacher is recognizing that each kid, yeah, you can do a handshake. Maybe not everybody wants a handshake. Maybe not everybody wants a hug. Maybe, you know, so when we are talking about doing this work, we're recognizing and honoring that not everybody in our community it's not going to be a one size fits all thing. What different communities are doing it, they're looking at the breadth of what are all the possibilities, who is here in our community, and how do we best serve their diverse needs. It speaks to also the challenge of the work. David, I think it was you who was talking about how, gosh, you know, I just don't have the time to go out there and be present the way I want to because my job, you know, the work has increased. And you're not alone. I hear that across the board in aging services, communities and organizations. Folks are feeling overworked, burnt out, and trying to do more with less. And so I think part of the conversation here is how do we shift the culture in the sense that we're looking at how do we create less burnout, right? How do we honor, you know, and just be more mindful of what we're doing and how we're doing it, and in a way that allows us to also recognize we have lives outside of work, right? So we're speaking, yes, about residents, but we're also speaking about our own experiences working in our communities. This photo in front of you is actually a mural that is on the wall of an organization's staff break room. And the staff is hugely diverse from all, I think this represents more than 20 different countries, about 20, maybe like actually 16, 17 different countries. And the leadership wanted to honor and recognize, hey, you know, you belong here. We all belong here and we value you. And so sometimes this feeling of belonging, this culture of belonging is as simple as, you know, having symbols, photos, something on the wall that says, hey, this is, you belong here. Right. And so I love this because I think it's just a powerful reminder. Every time the staff goes into the break room, they get to see this on, you know, and it takes up the whole wall. All right. I'm going to walk through what I call measures, and it's just kind of a snapshot of different things that organizations can do to really look at this work as a full journey with a culture shift. That what we're doing is we are embedding belonging into every aspect of our work. So once again, it doesn't feel like that extra thing that we have to add to our very long list of things to do, but it's embedded in what we do already. And so, you know, for example, do we know the data of our communities? Do we know what the staff demographic looks like, racial, ethnic demographic? background, religion, et cetera, for our teams as well as our residents, right? Do we know our communities? Have we laid that out? Are we clear on who's here? Because that really helps us understand, now that I know who's here, what are the different needs, right? Do you have LGBTQ plus staff and residents? And are they feeling like they belong, or are we not paying attention to what their unique needs might be? So have we mapped it out? Do we know the history of our communities? I work with some organizations where they have had a history of folks of color not being allowed into those spaces, right? They have a long history of no, this is there's certain demographic has lived here, and that has shifted, but that history is still there and still impacts the community, right? So it's about data, just to begin with, thinking about who are we serving, and then knowing also who's in our local community as well. Executive champions. So are there folks, the president, CEO, any executives who are recognize the value of this journey, who maybe you see things from your perspective and experience that maybe they haven't seen and that you can share with them? And because they're executive champions, they also are able to make some decisions, especially around finances and support and making things happen, that maybe in your role you might not have the same kind of ability to do. Or maybe this is you and you are an executive champion and you can make some decisions to shift the culture. So are you listening then to the needs of your staff and the residents? Right. So who are your executive champions? There's somebody in those roles who you all can tap into in terms of this work. All right. So I mentioned data earlier. This is just a reminder of why, as we're talking about this journey, why it's so important. By 2060, people of color will comprise close to half of the US population ages 65 and older. No wonder y'all are burnt out, right? Our numbers, we are seeing not only just an increase, right? We know the older adult population is growing larger, period. And it's growing more diverse. This data is just around race, ethnicity, but if we think about the increase of older adults who are LGBTQ, the increase of older adults who might have been born in different countries, it's you name it, different religions, the diversity is there and it will continue to grow and shift the current face of our communities. So this is the resident. So this is because I'm in Maryland, and I serve a lot of Maryland. But anyway, so in this state in particular, we see the shift. And once again, your state, wherever you are, the shifts are happening, right? All right. So other things that organizations are doing, who are your allies and what other things are similar organizations doing? So once again, we're going to have some time here to talk about that, but using each other as resources, it's great and it's collaborative and it's important and it's valuable. So really, you feel free to, share and learn from each other. It's so key in this work, in moving this work along, because it's not competition. Our communities are going to grow, whether we like it or not. We will continue to, be able to serve folks who want to be in our communities, but it's how are we doing that and how are we thinking outside of the box about that? Unite. So how are folks coming together, right? And I once again earlier we were talking about how are we doing that, right? That there's groups doing this and there's groups doing that. And I would say that to some degree, actually that's fine, right? And I say that because I went to college. So I grew up in California. I went to college at a school that was predominantly white, and I loved the school. I loved my experience, and I felt part of the whole school, even though my involvement happened to be more specifically in like the Filipino club and an Asian American interest sorority. And those connections with those smaller groups helped me feel part of the whole, right? So when we're talking about, yes, we want to bring everybody together, absolutely, there are opportunities to do that. And if you also have groups doing some different things as well, that is great too, and that should be honored and recognized and celebrated. Because someone who is part of the poetry club might not be interested in the political group on, as part of the community, right? Where they're talking about politics, or the book club, right? Someone who's part of the book club might not be interested in, another type of group. I work with a community that has kind of a woodworking folks interested in woodworking, right? Not my thing, but these smaller opportunities help folks feel connected to the larger organization. So I would say that's actually a good thing, and that's okay, right? So yes, you want to bring people together, and it might look different based on your community. Some communities also, some groups have the diversity councils, diversity work groups, bringing folks together, talking more specifically around the intentionality around this work. So if you don't have one yet and that would support this work, then, something to think about creating. This is an example from a community that created a work group, a committee, and they wanted to share that they existed and some of the work that they were doing with the community at large. And so they created this newsletter with kind of pictures of some of the events that they did and information about who they are. And there's also, I don't list the page here, but they listed each person's bios. So for the staff members as well as the residents, some biographical information about them, so that if residents had questions, concerns, or wanted just a resource to talk to, they knew that any one of these folks was accessible to chat with and talk with. Recruitment and retention, what does that look like? When we're talking about creating a culture of belonging, we're looking at our community overall. And so the hard work that our staff is doing, are we doing our best to honor and celebrate and recognize their work? Are we, in terms of recruitment, at many of the communities I work at, there are a lot of the executives and leaders, sometimes it's the group is predominantly white, and then we have folks who are particularly some of our frontline staff are folks of color, so kind of being aware of that, and what is there some intentionality to shift that and to look at, okay, how do we make sure that we also look at racial ethnic diversity among our leadership as well, right? So I am mentioning these things as things to pay attention to and look at, and are these conversations that are being had. I worked with a community that recognized that they had a good number of employees who were white and Black and African American, but in the local community, the Asian American and Latinx population was increasing, but they weren't attracting the Asian American and Latinx staff to work in their communities. And so they did more specific and intentional outreach to local Asian American and Latinx organizations, so that when a job opening came up, it wasn't that they were recruiting from their usual spaces, they also were recruiting in these organizations, community organizations that they had built some relationships with, right? So recruitment, retention, there is a community this is in Baltimore, Keswick. This is a recognition walkway. And one of the things that they did, they were thinking about their staff and recognizing that on the walls in some of their board community rooms, meeting rooms, there were photos of former board members and leaders of the organization, and they realized that a lot of those photos were of white males. And what they recognized also was there have been a lot of folks who are people of color, women, who have served the organization and helped the organization grow over decades. And they recognized and wanted to honor the work that these individuals had done as well. And so they included their photos, and a lot of these staff members had served the organizations for decades. Had served in dining services, had served in environmental services as housekeepers. And so in addition to the photos that already were on the walls, they decided, you know what, let's also honor the champions who have really run, helped run this organization and who've really stuck with us, and honor them as well. Right. So there's so many different ways we can create that sense of belonging. And this, in terms of recruitment and retention, when new folks, new employees walk by, they can see how we honor our staff members. It's just been a powerful visual reminder that this organization really cares about their employees and honors everyone of all backgrounds. Another aspect around community, this culture of belonging, is recognizing that sometimes it takes money, right, to do some of this work. And so is there funding available to, I work with a community that does an annual celebration of cultures, right? They bring food trucks from as many diverse different countries that they can, so that they get food from different countries, that they allow staff kind of take some time out of the day too to celebrate with residents, that they really take the time to put this huge day of celebration together to really honor the connection among staff and residents, and celebrate the diverse cultures and backgrounds. That it takes money, right, to do those kinds of things. And so is there funding available to really do this work, right? So it's not just the ideas, it's also, do we have the resources to make it happen, right? And if we are serious about shifting this culture and really deepening our culture of belonging, each one of these aspects is really important to the work. And then a strategy. So what some well-meaning organizations, they want to do the work. Some don't know where to start. Some are doing it here and there. But what I found to be most helpful with organizations that are doing this work and that have been able to sustain this work is that diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is part of their strategic plan. It's a part of the whole strategy that the organization is looking at, and it's getting funded, and it's getting attention, and it's getting support, right? And so are DEIB efforts part of the organization's strategic plan? If not, is there a way to incorporate it into it? Right. And so a lot of these organizations, they're doing the work, absolutely. And it's not just that they're doing the work and they want to do it. It's also because there's a bigger picture involved, right? That it really is connected with the overall strategy of the organization. So what I just shared with you are what I call measures. So there was an M, an E, and a, mapping it out, and what is it? Executive champion, allies, similar organizations, uniting, recruit and retain, economics and strategy. What you see in front of you are some examples of different things that organizations have done to continue building on this, culture of belonging, creating story circles where they facilitate spaces for residents to come together and share their stories. Some folks have a calendar of observances, and even though they don't recognize if you ever look at a calendar of different religions and cultural celebrations, it can be overwhelming to figure out how, do we celebrate all of it? You don't have to celebrate all of it, but what's important to your organization. So some communities use that calendar as a guide to look at, oh yeah, so we'll celebrate Black History Month in February. We're in the midst of Hispanic Heritage Month, right? Our organizations celebrating, doing something for Hispanic Heritage Month. Some organizations have a monthly newsletter, and instead of doing an event, they simply highlight that, hey, just for your information, this month is, they give a little history, right? So there's educational components to it. Some organizations have a speaker series, there's lunch and learns, there are book groups. They encourage professional development upon their staff. And so there are regular webinars and educational opportunities, community events. It's interesting. I think most recently over the last few months, a code of mutual respect. And I say that because what in some of the communities I'm working with, there have been more conversations around diversity related topics that have not been always very respectful, where language that has been used has actually been offensive, derogatory. And so there have been a few organizations now that have created some organizations call it a code of mutual respect. I've heard code of civility, etc. But they've created these statements of expectation for members in the community about, how they're expected to treat one another, that we're here to treat one another with respect. And we're here to, because some of these conversations have become really difficult. And so I share this list as just a snapshot of some different things that different communities are doing. So I'm going to pause there and let's see. Actually, no, let me finish this up, because like I said, I want to make sure we have time for some dialogue. So that's going to be the richness of it. I have a colleague working with Friends Services Alliance. Some of you may be familiar with that organization, but so they serve communities, aging services communities, but they have a Quaker-based foundation, but they do serve non-Quaker organizations. Anyway, she created this beautiful guide to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in aging services. And so that you can access that through the website here or clicking on this link. But it's a great resource for you. And I'll ask Sarah to send this slide deck out to all of you so that you have it and can take a look back at some of the different ideas and connect with some of these resources. Now, in terms of sustainability, I wanted to make sure I mentioned that, right? Because I just shared a bunch of tools and tips and things that you can do. But when it comes to sustainability, to be honest, it's a work in progress. And what I mean by that is we don't give up if something doesn't work. We observe it and we kind of figure out, okay, what's working here? And we plan. Sometimes we have to plan differently, right? Sometimes we roll something out and it doesn't turn out the way that we had hoped, right? So we observed, we made a plan for something, we acted, maybe it just didn't land the way that we had hoped. We reflect on it and we shift. All right, so what else can we do? What might we do differently? What community it might feel particularly, disconnected that we need to pay attention to? What opportunities exist? Maybe it's more staff than it is residents, or maybe it's both bringing both together. So observing and paying attention to your unique community, what the needs are, what the interests are, listening to different voices, making a plan on how are we going to once again deepen the work that we're doing, act on it, and then so I use this framework, this action research cycle, because sustainability is about revisiting and continuing the work, as frustrating as it can be, as hard as it can get, because it feels like, wait a minute, we tried this, we made our best efforts and had great intentions and it didn't quite work. We keep going. Our residents, they're going to continually shift and change and have different needs. And so we keep paying attention to what that looks like. So we keeping on, right? Keep on keeping on. Diversity is not a destination to be reached. It's a journey that has many milestones. So I'm going to pause there, and I'm looking at the time. I was hoping to do one more breakout group, but I think I'll just keep us to the large group if everybody's comfortable with that, just so that we can all hear each other's stories, ideas, etc., around what currently is being done, right? What measures is your organization taking to sustain a culture of belonging? And I heard, some of the sharing earlier about this shift. our organizations are shifting. We've expanded our sites. We're trying to, do more, and it's creating a lot of burnout. Let's speak to that. I'm going to stop my share. Let's talk about that, because I know that a lot of organizations are dealing with that right now. And part of, I know that I have an organization that actually I shared it earlier, right? They are, in terms of recruitment, because staffing has been an issue, that they have been reaching out to some different places for recruitment, right? And so retention, some organizations are doing more to recognize their employees. If some of them didn't have as robust of a recognition program, and so they've been more intentional about creating that. And even though it might sound like it's more work, what happens when we create these kinds of systems where we, develop a more intentional recognition program, et cetera, what we see over time is more staff willing to step up and support the work and engage more to lessen the load on others in that space. So some of this work actually becomes less work later on, because we've built the community, because we have increased the engagement, because people feel more connected and therefore are willing to do more, right? So let me pause there. Hi everyone. I would love to take these this last few minutes with you and hear from you. What are your organizations doing? What are you experiencing and seeing that you're like, actually I'd like to share this with you all, because this has been a game changer for us, right?
Unfortunately, I can't really share any large success stories. It's inch by inch gains because of time poverty. The comment that you made earlier regarding belonging, and that needs to be more accessible, but everyone may not want the same thing, has been a challenge with our DEI committee, because your comment about there's something to celebrate almost every day really hit a nerve, and to try to narrow that down and avoid arguments of what's important and what isn't. But again, it's time and time poverty that's driving everything. And for not-for-profit organizations where leadership and managers legitimately have 2 to 3 roles, we're trying to balance what we can, be present, and provide meaning without dropping the ball in any one situation. So it's staying in touch, it's staying connected, it's being contrite and apologizing, and moving meetings and moving initiatives forward, while still trying to really maintain the focus on our frontline workers, hourly employees, and provide value to them, because at the end of the day, they are our most precious assets.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I wish I could offer more, but that's really what we're experiencing right now.
Right. No, David, thank you for your insight on that. The community that I was describing that does the kind of cultural celebration day, they actually do that in place of the monthly or daily celebrations, because they were feeling the same thing. They're like, we can't, and somebody's going to feel left out, and and we just don't have the capacity. But can we do at least one large scale celebration that will be memorable, and we do it annually, and we commit to it, and everybody's engaged with that, right? And so I think it's about being creative as well, thinking outside of the box about, all right, that's not realistic, but what is? And there may be folks who, once again, might just we're not hearing their voices just yet. And so how do we engage them in getting them more involved? Because I hear you, David, the frustration around feeling overworked, overwhelmed, understaffed, like all that is, you're not alone in that. And guess what? As the data shows, the numbers of residents and folks needing our care and wanting to live in our communities and the diverse, their different changing needs, that's real. That is real. So I see in the chat box, oh, that's you. Okay. But I'm going to say this, David, because I think it's important that you said, that your allies are very much your clinical care team and care management team. They support our residents. The less the next levels of care will be overwhelmed by emergent surprise issues, the more proactive we can be to circle the wagons, compare information that is allowable, the more we help not only our residents, but also protect the allocation and scheduling of resources. Right, right. I love that. Protect the allocation and scheduling of resources. Such a need. All right. We have just 5 minutes and so I'm always one to honor your time, but I also want to make sure we get to hear your voices as well and thoughts, ideas. How can we support each other on this journey and especially moving forward?
Jennifer, is there one thing you would say would be a first step? You'd say, if you're not doing anything else, do this. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I have a couple thoughts on that. Well, number one, I believe in the value of the committees, of diversity group of bringing together folks to talk about what's on their minds around this. So if you don't already have some type of work group or some folks coming together, that'd be number one. I think the other piece is so this is the thing, and I think each one of us can make a difference in everyday work and life, right? If we are not already greeting folks as we're in the halls at work or in our communities, if we're not saying hello, making eye contact, hopefully folks have name badges, and if they don't, just taking the time to get to know each other, those little things make a big difference. And I worked with an organization that some of the staff members, particularly in environmental services and housekeeping, and some of the nurses even, were saying that they were expected to greet, folks, right? But they were not experiencing that same kind of greeting from others. And so they knew, and that's what they were doing, but it wasn't being reciprocated. And for some of them, you never know what somebody's going through on a daily basis. Can we take the time, yes, we've got a lot on our plates. Yes, it's very frustrating. Can we take the time to make that one connection? Hello, greeting, So I know that's a small thing. You're like, no, give me more. But to be honest, in some of the communities I work at, that's not even happening because people are so stressed out. Right. So taking the time to make that personal connection. And it feels, once again, it might feel like a chore, might feel like a chore because there's already so much on our plates. But so those small gestures can make a huge difference, right? If we're talking about a culture of belonging, it's a culture in which each one of us is making sure to see and hear everyone to the best of our ability, even if it's that, 5-second hello.
You are so right, Jennifer. This is Belinda from Asbury Methodist Village. It's true. I just hear David and I hear the frustration and all that because this work is really just frustrating. But one thing that I've realized had worked for our organization and a few places that I've read about is that the very first data that you showed, at a point, DEIB and belonging is going to be a business case. The population of workers is changing, the diversity is changing, and even the residents that we are getting is changing. So if an organization, maybe you are a mid-level manager or even like you are somewhere there and your top leadership are not allied in this, I think getting some information and starting to have that conversation somehow to let them understand that, well, our business is going to be impacted. if it soon does not become a strategic thing, and I think that hits people because at the end of the day, we all have to balance budget. And if you are going to be losing employees because you are not doing where the industry is going to impact you. So I think that is a conversation that people have to be bold enough to start having, that DEIB is a business decision. It's a business case, and there is a good business case for it out there. There is enough data out there for us to have that conversation about. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Linda, thank you for bringing up that point. It is, it isn't just starting to be, it is, right? The data's there. Our communities are going to shift. And what are we doing to prioritize paying attention to that shift and making it manageable for us? Because if we're not looking at that now, then it's going to be more complicated as it continues to shift and grow. So we start putting in the systems now where we are embedding this culture of belonging. We're embedding this sense that no matter what walk of life any of our staff members or residents come from, they feel like they belong in our communities and they want to stay, right? All right, y'all. So I want to honor your time. My contact information is in the slides as well. So if ideas and things come up later on, would be happy to stay in touch. Thank you so much for your time. Wow, that time flew by. And I wish you all the best. This is not easy work, and it's frustrating to hear so much like love for this work, but also challenge with trying to make it all happen, right? But I appreciate all the work that you do and wish you all the best. All right, everyone.